Ladies and gentlemen, this is our last video of the week, so we're gonna make it a good one. In today's video, we're gonna go over the top 12 injury situations that you need to know about and update you on what that means for your potential starters and who could be options for you if your starters are gonna be out. We're also gonna go over our final tier rankings so that you can be fully prepared to dominate your opponents this weekend. We're gonna go over all of the top starts for quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and finish it out with tight ends. If you have any questions about any start-sit options that you're wondering about, drop them down below or hit me up on the Sleeper app. I would love to get back to you and let you know my opinion. If you are new to the channel, or if you haven't got to it yet, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out a bunch, enables me to do what I love so I can keep bringing you the content that you love. With all of that out of the way, let's get into this week's Start Sit. We will start at quarterback, and there are a couple to cover. We're going to start with Tyrod Taylor, who is not going to play this week, which makes that Rams defense an even better start, and it was already our number one ranked on the week. This also means a slight downgrade for Brandon Cooks, because now he doesn't only have to worry about Jalen Ramsey, he also has to worry about Davis Mills. Next up is Dak Prescott, and this situation is critical for owners because they play on Sunday night. This news puts owners in quite a bind. My advice is to find another option now and wait as updates roll in right until kickoff on Sunday morning. It is now harder to trust both wide receivers in Dallas, and I am downgrading the pass catchers. I do not trust Cooper Rush to be able to produce if he has to, and so we are gonna have to take the safer route here. I am going into this weekend with the assumption that Dak Prescott sits because he is just too valuable to the long-term plans of the Cowboys. I think this moves Amari Cooper down to that low-end wide receiver 2 territory. CeeDee Lamb falls from a wide receiver 1 to a high-end wide receiver 2. As far as the running backs are concerned, I think they'd probably see a little more volume. However, I think that that's also going to be negated by the fact that if Cooper Rush starts, those touches are going to be less valuable and less efficient. Let's now get into our quarterback tiers. We'll take you through step by step. Tier 1 starts with Josh Allen against Miami, and if the Dolphins hold Allen to under 30 points, that's a good game for them. Next up at 2, we have Patrick Mahomes. He gets the Giants on that Monday night showdown. I think the Chiefs want to prove that they're not done just yet. At 3, it is Matthew Stafford. He finishes off the tier and potentially gets an emotional boost after the Cardinals looked horrendous Thursday night. Jalen Hurts is the top of our second tier. He goes on the road to face the Lions in a smash matchup. Then we have Tom Brady on the road against New Orleans. No Antonio Brown, no problem, because Gronk is back. Next up on the tier is Justin Herbert at home against New England. He's going to be motivated to show that that Ravens game was a fluke. The last player in our second tier is Joe Burrow on the road against the hapless Jets. On to our third tier, and it starts with Kirk Cousins against Dallas. And now, since it's not really a big game because Dak's probably going to be out, Cousins will probably ball out. Next, we have Daniel Jones on the road against Kansas City. We love the matchup, and he's got to be excited because some of his wide receivers might be healthy. Next up is Ryan Tannehill on the road against the Colts, and then Teddy Bridgewater against Washington's football team. Carson Wentz is up next at home against the Titans, and then the final player on this tier is Trevor Lawrence going on the road to face Seattle. Could this be the potential breakout performance of the season for Lawrence? Maybe. Matt Ryan is up next. He starts our fourth tier at home against Carolina. Next is Taylor Heineke on the road against Denver, and we better enjoy Mr. Bud Lighty while we can, as his time is probably running out. We move on to Jameis Winston at home against the Bucks, and could he take advantage of this matchup? Probably not. He'll just dump it off to Alvin Kamara 20 times. Next in our tier 5 list it starts with Geno Smith at home against Jacksonville. We then move to Ben Roethlisberger on the road against Cleveland, and you can prove me wrong, Ben, I dare ya. Mac Jones is next, and he gets the Los Angeles Chargers on the road. And finally, we have Jared Goff at home against the Eagles. We now move to our running backs, and we're going to start with Austin Eckler, who popped up Thursday on the injury report with a hip issue. He also did not practice on Friday, and that is horrible news for managers. Due to the Chargers playing in the second set of games, a backup plan for him needs to be in place. Joshua Kelly could be the one that benefits the most. However, this is likely a committee backfield if Eckler misses, which doesn't help us at all. This means that Eckler falls a bit due to the risk that is now taken on. Watch closely as the information comes out on Eckler because he plays in the second set of games. If you're looking for another desperation option, someone like Brandon Bolden, who's available in 85% of leagues, he may be playing second fiddle. However, he does have a great matchup in the Chargers defense. If you have an option to flex, Tyler Johnson is a deep option with some upside in that Tampa Bay offense. Let's now move to Antonio Gibson, and for what seems like the first time all season, Gibson does not have an injury designation heading into Sunday's game. While his shin is obviously still bothering him, he gets a little bit of a bump in our rankings due to an increase in my confidence in starting him. The Broncos also gave up 150 yards on the ground to some dude named Dearness Johnson, so there is upside here. We now move to Miles Sanders, and after it was reported that he was going onto IR, coach Nick Sirianni immediately refuted that, at least for now. I bring this up because what that means is if Kenneth Gainwell or Boston Scott are available on your waiver wire, you need to pick them up immediately in case Sanders misses a longer term. They have a great matchup this week against Detroit. Now, the preferred option here is clearly Gainwell. He is a low-end RB2, whereas Boston Scott is more of a desperation flex. Let's now move to Alex Collins, who is questionable with a groin injury and did not practice on Thursday. With a late Sunday kickoff, managers have to have other options available in case Collins can't go. This is a decent matchup with Jacksonville. However, whatever is behind Collins is clearly unknown. It's probably going to be some Rashad Penny with a little bit of Travis Homer sprinkled in. I don't see either of those guys as a starting option, however, so we need to have another person we can slide in. If I am an owner of Collins, I am assuming the worst and looking elsewhere. If you can pick up someone like J.D. McKissic, who's available in 40% of leagues and has a late start, that is a good option. If you have flex capability, someone like Laviska Shenault might be available, and if you're looking for a dart throw option, Tim Patrick could be that guy as well. The last running backs that we are going to cover before we get into our tiers is Saquon Barkley and Devontae Booker, who play that Monday night game on the road. Barkley comes in questionable, but I highly doubt that he actually plays. Even if he does, I expect limited snaps and very little usage. That means that we keep Booker as a high volume flex option with a little bit of upside. If you are a Barkley owner, you need to find a different option and wait until next week. Let's now get into our final running back tiers of the week, and we start with Dalvin Cook at number 1 at home against Dallas. Homer pick or not, he is going to dominate. Number 2 is Derrick Henry on the road against the Colts. At 3, it is DeAndre Swift at home against Philadelphia. Alvin Kamara's clone jumps him in this week's rankings. Next up is Alvin Kamara at home against Tampa Bay. We move on to James Robinson going on the road to face Seattle, and then it's Jonathan Taylor against Tennessee at home. The last player in our tier 1 is Ezekiel Elliott on the road against Minnesota. There is concern with the Dak situation, but his volume is likely to be insane. In our second tier, we start with Darrell Henderson Jr. on the road against the Texans. Next up, it's Joe Mixon on the road against the Jets. We move then to Austin Eckler, who has slid down slightly with that new injury, but don't panic just yet. Next up is Najee Harris on the road against the Cleveland Browns, and then it's Damian Harris on the road against the Chargers, and I think a solid encore performance is imminent. Nick Chubb is next at home against Pittsburgh. Welcome back, Mr. Chubb. I think he's going to see heavy usage as Cleveland tries to take pressure off of Baker. Our third tier starts with Cordero Patterson against the Carolina Panthers, and then it's Darrell Williams at home against the Giants. After putting up a dud last week, he's going to be part of that statement game for Kansas City. Next, we move to Khalil Herbert, who is at home against the San Francisco 49ers. Then it is Chuba Hubbard on the road against Atlanta. This is an excellent matchup with a horrible offense. Who's going to win? We move to Elijah Mitchell. He goes on the road against the Chicago Bears. Then it is Leonard Fournette on the road against the New Orleans Saints. And the final player in our tier 3 is Antonio Gibson. Moving up, he's on the road against Denver. This may not be a great start, but the Broncos has shown some vulnerability as of late. Our fourth tier starts with Zach Moss at home against Miami. Positive game script equals solid production here. Then it's Kenneth Gainwell on the road against the Lions. We move then to Javonte Williams. He gets the Washington football team at home, and the emergence is coming. If you can buy him still, do it. Next up is Devontae Booker on the road against Kansas City. Melvin Gordon is next at home against Washington. Next up is Myles Gaskin on the road against Buffalo, and I am still seeking to understand what this guy actually is. He is the last player in our fourth tier. As we move to tier 5, it starts with Michael Carter at home against Cincinnati. Then it is J.D. McKissick. He plays on the road against Denver. Alex Collins is next against Jacksonville. There is a lot of risk here and not a ton of reward. Tony Pollard is next on the road against Minnesota, and then it's Devin Singletary against Miami at home. The final player in our rankings is Jamal Williams at home against Philly. There's going to be a decent workload here, but there is little to no valuable touches. We have a couple wide receivers to look at. The first one is Antonio Brown, and as we presumed in our wide receiver rankings video, he is going to be out this week. That means that Mike Evans and Chris Godwin remain solid starts for us, with Godwin being the better play because he is likely to avoid coverage from Marshawn Lattimore. You cannot bench Evans even with that shadow coverage, but expectations need to be tempered. Next up is the combination of Julio Jones and A.J. Brown. We know that Julio is out for sure, so expect even more targets to come A.J.'s way. He does not carry in injury designation coming into this week, and it is a plus matchup against Indy, so that means that there is massive boom potential here. Now we move to Courtland Sutton and the Jerry Jeudy combination. Earlier in the week, we had Courtland Sutton down a little bit in our rankings as we thought that Jerry Jeudy would be returning injury-free. However, Jeudy has shown some soreness in practice and is likely to not be 100%. That means that we bump Sutton back up into our higher wide receiver 2 range, and Jeudy all the way down to a risky flex option. The final two players we will look at are the Giants wide receivers in Kadarius Toney and Sterling Shepard. What a headache this New York Giants team is. Limited on Friday, Shepard will probably play while he deals with his lingering hamstring injury. It looks like the same situation for Kadarius Toney, whose ankle has been causing him problems. Due to the risks and their matchup coming on Monday night, I'm advising owners to look elsewhere for production if at all possible, even with the juicy matchup. If you're feeling lucky, Shepard is my preference of the two. However, if you can go and get someone like Mecole Hardman who plays in that game and is available on your wire, he would be a great fallback option. Let's now move into my wide receiver tiers, and at tier 1, the first player on our list is Cooper Kupp on the road against Houston. He is that dude, and he probably should have been the wide receiver 1 3 weeks ago. Next up is Stephon Diggs at home against Miami. We then move to Jamar Chase on the road against the Jets. Justin Jefferson is next. He gets Dallas, and I cannot wait to see the gritty on Sunday night. At 5, it is Deebo Samuel on the road against Chicago, and then Tyreek Hill is next at home against the Giants. The final player in tier 1 is A.J. Brown, and there is volcano exploding potential here. We move to tier number 2, and it starts with Mike Williams at home against New England. There is more risk than we would like here, but overall wide receiver 1 upside is weekly for him. Next up is Chris Godwin on the road against the Saints. We move then to DJ Moore. He's on the road against Atlanta, and he actually may not mind PJ Walker taking snaps. Honestly. Next up is Scary Terry McLaurin. He goes on the road to face the Broncos. We move then to Calvin Ridley at home against Carolina. The 2021 coming out party is inbound. I'm going to keep saying it until it happens. We move then to CeeDee Lamb on the road against Minnesota. He has slid down a little bit with the news of Dak. Next up is Deontay Johnson on the road against Cleveland. He is going to be force-fed 5 to 7 yard routes all day. The final player in tier 2 is Keenan Allen. He is at home against the Patriots. We move next to tier 3, and it starts with DK Metcalf against Jacksonville. He could go off, or he could see 3 targets and record 15 yards. Next up is Adam Thielen at home against the Cowboys. We then move to Mike Evans on the road against New Orleans in that potential shadow coverage situation. Michael Pittman Jr. is next versus Tennessee at home. Courtland Sutton gets a jump, and he is our next player. Since Jerry Jeudy isn't 100%, there is plenty of upside here and a great matchup against the football team. Next up is Bobby Trees, and Robert Woods is a great start here on the road against Houston. Emmanuel Sanders is next at home against Miami. And the final player in our third tier is Amari Cooper on the road against Minnesota. Obviously, the risk is aplenty, but you probably can't bench him. We move to our fourth tier, and it starts with T. Higgins on the road against the Jets. He's probably not going to see 15 targets again all season. Hopefully he can start to produce more with less. Next up is Devonta Smith on the road against the Lions. We then move to Chase Claypool on the road against the Browns. Then it is Marvin Jones on the road against the Seahawks. Jalen Waddle is up next. He plays Buffalo on the road, and Devontae Parker is still banged up, so even in a tough matchup, Tua doesn't really have any other options. Jacoby Myers is next. He faces the Chargers on the road, and then it's Brandon Cooks at home against the Rams. We hope here for a busted coverage, or Ramsey getting bored and wandering elsewhere. The final player in our Tier 4 list is Laviska Shenault on the road against Seattle. We have just a few players in our Tier 5 list, and it starts with both Giants pass catchers, Sterling Shepard and Kadarius Toney, both playing the Chiefs. One of these two is likely to hit if they play, but good luck finding out who that is. The final player on our list is Jerry Jeudy against the Washington football team, and I just don't have a ton of faith that he's going to see a decent snap share. If you're waiting on a guy on Monday night or Sunday night, Mecole Hardman would be a decent desperation option. Let's now move to our tight ends, and only one of note to talk about. It's Rob Gronkowski, and he is questionable to play, but it looks like he will. We had already assumed that he would, so there is no real move in the rankings. Now let's get to our tight end tiers. Tier 1, a man of his own, is Travis Kelce. He is at home against the Giants, and I expect 100+ yards and a score as the Chiefs stop embarrassing themselves. Our second tier starts with Kyle Pitts against Carolina. We then move to TJ Hawkinson. He's at home against Philly. He is due for a big game and has been more involved over the last 2 weeks. Next up, it's Mike Gesicki on the road against Buffalo. In Tier 3, it starts with Noah Fant against that Washington football team. Rob Gronkowski is next on the road against New Orleans, and Brady is going to welcome him back with open arms and plenty of targets. In Tier 4, it starts with Dallas Goedert on the road against Detroit. Next up, it's Tyler Higbee. He faces Houston on the road. Eventually, his high snap rate and usage is going to translate statistically. Hunter Henry is next on the road against the Chargers. We move to our fifth and final tier, and that starts with CJ Uzomah on the road against the New York Jets. He is as boom or bust as they come. Next up, it is Jared Cook at home against New England. And finally, Ricky Seals-Jones on the road against Denver. And that is all I got for you guys. Thank you so much for joining me. Please drop any start, sit questions down below or hit me up on the Sleeper app. I would love to engage and answer your questions. If you're new or haven't got to it yet, please like and subscribe. It helps me out a bunch and I greatly appreciate it. This is Relentless Press. I am your host, Avery Mopats, and we'll see you next time.